Good evening, Ben.
Good evening, Jonty. Nice to see you again.
Likewise. So, the biggest problem in the world, from my perspective, is this issue of declining populations.
Yeah, and you know, it's interesting you say that because nature has a way of controlling itself when populations get too dense. Nature will actually make it harder to reproduce for some reason. They
Mm,
see this with animal studies when animals are packed together in a closed setting like rats in a cage,
right,
for example.
right.
They will less likely to reproduce.
Mm.
It's kind of like one of nature's safety valves,
It's like
and that
the guy in mind concept or something like that. That
kind of like that. Like Gaia knows what it's doing, and it's
mm,
kind of interesting because infertility is a serious problem.
mm,
A lot of
mm,
people can't make a baby, and they want to have babies, they want to have children, they want to start a family, they can't do it. And one of the big reasons that is because of the stress response.
mm,
And just like Gaia has a stress response in a sense that when Gaia is under duress and there's too many people, there's the population of humans or animals is too high, it will sort of kick in with a safety valve mechanism to prevent reproduction from occurring.
mm,
That happens with individual humans as well. And when a human being is under duress, when stress hormones, for example, are elevated, cortisol is elevated, it'll be much less likely to have to allow the body will be much less likely to conceive a baby.
mm,
This is
mm,
why there's something very interesting that can bypass or override or mitigate this response. It's called foreplay.
mm.
Have you ever
Right,
heard of this term, foreplay? you know, what,
right.
what what that's supposed to do is that's supposed to activate the parasympathetic nervous system,
Mm,
the relaxation nervous system.
right.
This idea of just calming the body down and relaxing the body before you attempt to conceive a baby is the
Mm,
most important strategy for folks who are dealing with infertility issues,
right.
to relax the body. That's why hot tubs have a reputation for leading to, sexual activities, because when
Mm,
you're in a hot tub, when your body is relaxed, when your muscles are relaxed, your parasympathetic nervous system is activated, the sympathetic nervous system is quieted down, you're going to be much more likely to your libido will be increasing, you'll be much more likely to conceive a baby.
mm,
So the biggest problem we have with fertility issues is our bodies are under duress, and the biggest problem Gaia has, or I don't know if it's a problem, but the
mm.
biggest reason why Gaia or Earth's wisdom is limiting the populations because it's under collective duress as well. Okay, so anyway, in any case, yeah, things to relax the body: slow, deep breathing
Mm.
before you're trying to conceive a baby. Water, warm water, bathtubs, hot tubs. Everything you want to do to lower your blood pressure, to relax the body, or help you fall asleep. All of these are the same idea. All massage. All of these have the same basic uh, mechanism of action, that is
Mm.
lowering cortisol.
Right.
Lower cortisol, you're much more likely to conceive a baby. You're much more likely to have a libido.
Well, I know, Ben, a lot of folks are talking about various toxicities coming from all manner of plastics and all,
Now,
all,
here's the
all
thing about
sorts of
all that.
different stuff in our
Yeah,
environment.
all of these kinds of things that you hear about, like BPA,
Hmm.
bisphenol A, and xenoestrogens and such. All of these activate estrogen. Estrogen is birth
Mm.
control.
Mm.
And so many of the toxins that our environment, many of the toxins in our environment are said to be xenoestrogens, xenoestrogenic. Xeno
Mm.
means foreign, and they're foreign versions of the estrogen molecule. The estrogen, you've heard of the term estrogen. Estrogen is like a family of molecules.
Mm.
And in nature, there's zillions of estrogenic molecules. They're found
Mm.
in various plants, which is kind of interesting. You know why? You know why you find estrogen in plants?
Because it's trying to
Because
limit the amount of babies that its predators have.
bingo,
Huh.
bingo, very good. Estrogen is birth control.
Mm.
And so estrogen in plants can function as birth control. Estrogens in water through the birth control pill can function as birth control.
Mm.
And plastics,
Mm.
and not just plastics, but a lot of chemicals, organic chemicals, have estrogenic properties, and they function as birth control.
Mm.
So what you're pointing at is the toxins in the environment that have xeno, meaning foreign, estrogenic effects act as natural birth control, the way the birth control pill acts like birth control, or the way estrogens in plants act like birth control,
Mm.
or birth control for the rabbits, if you will.
Right.
Alfalfa and carrots will make birth control for the rabbits. The rabbits eat the carrots or the alfalfa, and then they don't make any little baby rabbits. which I always thought was really cool.
Mm.
How plants are like one step ahead. They're planning for the next generation. They can't do anything about the rabbit that's eating the carrot, but they can do something
Yeah.
about the next generation. It's kind of a
Right.
clever way that plants work. Bottom line is that between xenoestrogens and plant estrogens, we have another reason why birth birth rates are declining
Mm.
and fertility is declining, and even male sexual organs are declining. You probably know this.
Mm.
That male sexual, and also there are hermaphroditic animals that are being born, especially in water that's been contaminated. So this was actually written about in the I think it was late 1990s, early 2000s. Actually, it might even before. It was the mid 1990s. A book came out called Our Stolen Future. It was actually written by Al Gore, and it was about toxicity in the environment. And one of the things he noted was that animals were becoming hermaphroditic, or their male animals, where their sexual organs were diminishing in size, and he attributed it correctly to these xenoestrogens and other toxins and contaminants in the water supply. So between cortisol and stress and toxicity in the environment and plant toxicity or plant xenoestrogens,
Yeah.
you have a lot of reasons for declining birth rates and increasing infertility rates.
Well, I don't know if people really realize how serious of a problem this is. It's not just about a couple of folks that are trying to have a kid and they can't.
It's like one out of three.
What we're looking at here globally is a massive population collapse.
Yeah.
They're talking, folks. I was reading the other day. China right now has a population that's somewhere around 1.2 to 1.4 billion. They're going to have 400 million people in the year 2100, 80 years from now.
Are you serious?
The population of Russia is already in steep decline. It's in about 30 years, they're going to have half as many people as they do now. Most of Europe is going to have half as many people as they do today. And we're talking empty houses everywhere,
Is that necessarily a bad thing?
Well, it's not going to be an easy thing to manage economically, because you end up with a geriatric population when 40, 50% of the population is 60, 70, 80. Who are going to be the ones that are producing and creating and taking care of them? So some of the problems that we're really excited about trying to solve are going to be much harder to solve, because we also have to take care of grandpa and grandma at the same time that we're doing it.
But on the other hand, you don't want to have uncontrolled growth.
Right.
You don't want to have uncontrolled pipes. So I think there's a sweet spot probably where you want to be, where you want to have, and that requires a certain amount of planning and a certain amount of cleaning up the environment. What we've been doing to the environment for the last 600, 700 years, since probably the late Middle Ages, contaminating the environment and at an accelerated pace over the last 100 years, that's not sustainable. It can't keep going.
Right. Well, there's sort of two sides to it.
Have you heard about the mask problem now?
No.
Masks that are being thrown out are creating this entirely new category of waste, which is plastic masks.
Yeah. No, I mean, I can only imagine. Well, there's sort of two competing schools of thought. I don't know if they're competing necessarily, but there's all those. You probably heard of the Club of Rome folks,
right?
Back in whenever that was, the 70s and 80s, who were
controlling population.
Their whole thing was that we're going to have too large of a population, and you'll have that whole population collapse scenario, like they did with, I don't know, sheep in certain islands in New Zealand or stuff like that, where the population shoots way up and then absolutely collapses.
Right.
And point well taken. But a lot of population growth mitigation measures that we've invested in heavily, primarily things like educating women and making sure that they had the opportunity to have a career. We're now looking at a situation where we maybe need to back off on the gas a little bit on this one. We've maybe overdone it a little bit, Have
you heard of the Georgia Guidestones?
Yes.
That's like one of the key principles on the Georgia Guidestones was, reducing the population by billions of people.
The optimum population would be 500 million or something like that.
Something like that, right?
Yeah. I'm not sure who that was.
That's an interesting story behind the Georgia Guidestone.
Right. Some
I don't
obscure
know. I
occult
don't know
group.
what that's about.
Hopefully, whoever was involved with that don't have their reins too much on their hands too much on the reins of power, because I'd like to see feel. I mean, there was a certain politician who I'm not going to name in the United States who was going around telling everybody, "Don't have children. It's irresponsible to have children because of the damage we're doing to the planet." But I'd say the opposite thing. Because of the damage we're doing to the planet, it's difficult to have children. But if you don't have children, if we don't have a younger generation,
right? Well, your point's well taken. That's
we're
right.
in some real trouble. Then
that's right. As it is, we might be in real trouble. People my age. I'm not counting on getting anything. I'm not counting, survive on anything I get.
Yeah, I mean that's something to think about as well. Is that we've designed our economic systems to work with this concept of constant growth. The Federal Reserve wants to see 2% growth every year, or else we're in real trouble. And
realistically, how do you sustain steady, constant growth like that?
If we have a collapsing population, how much is your house going to be worth? You've invested all this money in your home, and you're hoping to sell it or rent it in order to retire.
Right.
If you're looking at a situation where the population
declines, there's way more houses than there are people who need to be in houses.
And I actually saw this in Italy in 2003, because they already had a declining population then. And I remember driving along through a sort of remote area and seeing these empty houses on the hillside that were crumbling. And this light went off, and I thought, wow, this is something to really be aware of here, because we'll see what happens with this in the future. And boy, I mean, I didn't know. I mean, the numbers now that people are talking about, it's population collapse pretty much everywhere. Everywhere it's in steep decline. Mexico, everybody always thinks, there's so many people in Mexico and they all want to come across the border. Mexico, right. I think it was 2017 is
birth rates are declining.
Their birth rate went below replacement level.
Wow.
Circa 2017.
Interesting.
So it's actually the population of Mexico is growing, but it's from people coming from further south and moving there. Likewise, the population of the United States is continuing to grow, but it's from people moving here. We legally accept about 1.3 million people.
Are American birth rates declining too?
We're not at population replacement. It's only because we accept so many immigrants.
Interesting. So what's the next one here? The breakfast one.
Okay, yeah, sure.
That's the breakfast one.
Yeah.
So I like that one. I thought that was kind of interesting. Coconut milk and fruit. The only problem is, and that's a great idea, the only problem is that fruit today is not the same as fruit used to be. Fruits have been bred and genetically modified to be super high sugar, super sweet, with decreased medicinal compounds. They figured the medicinal compounds tend to be bitter. So the good stuff that's in fruits tend to be bitter, and so they do these genetic modifications, and not just GMO where they actually go into the gene itself, but just through breeding techniques. They breed and they select for fruits that have extra sugar and less medicinal value. So that's the only problem with starting your meals off with strawberries and blueberries and coconut milk. Other than that, it's actually not a bad idea. I think it's makes more sense to start off your meal with protein, start off your day with protein, or start off your day with ketogenically. But it's certainly way better than cereal.
Exactly. It's better than cornflakes, for God's sake.
Yeah, it's better than cornflakes. So, that was kind of interesting. But that also leads to your other article, which talked about the 3 meals a day thing, which I always thought was kind of crazy. Like, I don't have time to eat 3 meals a day. Maybe when I'm retired, I can sit there and divide my day up by 3. I don't like eating lunch because in the middle of the day, it breaks up my day. People always want to have lunch meetings. They're always salespeople call me up and they want to do lunch. I'm like, I don't want to stop everything I'm doing just to have lunch. And so I eat breakfast, and then sometimes that's it, or sometimes I'll have something when I come home, and then I won't eat anything after 5 or 6 o'clock, and then I go to the next day for breakfast. I'll have a smoothie around 10 or 11 o'clock. So I don't know why do people feel like they need to have 3 meals a day? I think we psychologically, Jonty, we want to stop our day. We want to distract ourselves. It's fun to eat. I love the Food Channel, but I don't really feel compelled to make everything that I see on the Food Channel. I like watching it. Food is cool to me, how they cook food, how they prepare food, but I don't feel, like I have to go out and make everything that I see on the Food Channel just because I see it and it looks interesting. I watch a show sometimes called carnival eats. Have you ever seen the show where they go and they interview people in food vendors in carnivals, and they show how they're eating foods? And I wouldn't dream of eating those foods, but it's still fascinating, the chemistry of it, how they're blending everything, and the creativity of it. It's really interesting. So we have this kind of love affair with food. The idea of food is so interesting to us that we are obsessed with eating, and I think that we should be able to separate our love of food and the creative side of food, the aesthetic value of food, from the need to indulge in food all the time. Food is a very powerful biomodulator. It controls our biology more than anything, with the exception of maybe our thoughts and our feelings. Nothing controls our biology like food. Now, drugs maybe do, but we don't take drugs like we take food. Although we do take a lot of drugs, but certainly we don't do it like food. For most people, food is like the hugest, most powerful intervention into our biochemistry. We should be eating very, very carefully, especially, Jonty. I know you're a young man now, but here's my advice from an old guy, to the young bloods out there, including you. Eating is a young man's game. Once you reach a certain point in your life, a certain age in your life, eating is not anywhere near as important as it is when you were younger. We don't need to be putting a lot of calories in our body, and there's a lot of literature. In fact, there's been a lot of literature for decades that shows that the less you eat, the longer you live. Calorie deprivation leads to activation of anti-aging hormones. It reduces inflammatory markers, and it actually adds years to your life, particularly if you're sick. If you're sick, you eat less food, calories that is, your body can reroute nutrients that are going to be expended by your intestine and by your liver to break down the foods into fighting diseases, into growth and repair. And this is especially true with enzymes. There was a guy named Dr. Edward Howell who wrote a book called The Food Enzyme Concept. Actually, I forgot the name of the book, but he came up with a theory called the food enzyme theory, where he said that the more enzymes you expend on digesting your food, the less enzymes you're going to have available for metabolism, metabolic enzymes. And most of the foods we eat today don't replace the enzymes that it costs us to digest the foods. If you're eating fresh foods that have enzymes in them, particularly vegetables and produce, you're going to get the enzymes that you need to digest the food in the foods that you're eating. The foods will essentially self-digest. But because we don't eat foods that contain enzymes, we're expending our scarce, precious resources, enzyme resources, to digest the food. And those enzymes are coming out of our metabolic enzyme pool. This is what Dr. Edward Howell talked about in the 1940s and 1950s. He actually wrote a book in the 1980s where he talked about it. It's called Enzyme Nutrition, is the name of the book. And his theory was that one of the reasons for our longevity issues is the fact that we're depriving our body of enzymes by not eating enzyme-rich foods. So raw foods become important, or slightly steamed foods, and vegetables and produce become important because they're nature's best sources of food enzymes.
Well, isn't one of the aspects of this 3 meals a day thing the fact that it takes something that is very important to have as a conscious process, and it makes it an unconscious process?
Yeah, eat when you're hungry instead of eating just because it's 6 o'clock and it's 12 o'clock and it's 8 o'clock. How about if you eat when your stomach says eat? If you want to lose weight, one of the best ways to lose weight is only eat when your stomach or your body tells you to eat, and stop eating when your body says you've had enough. I do this myself. I notice if I cook a meal, which I don't do a lot, but if I'm cooking a meal, after 3 or 4 bites, I'm not necessarily hungry anymore, but I just cooked that whole meal.
There's the whole meal sitting there.
It's still sitting there.
No, I know. I've certainly done that to myself.
Right? I notice myself that, and I'm paying attention, but I still do it, that I'm eating way past the point where my body says you don't need to eat anymore. And all that extra food is extra energy that is now being stored somewhere in my body. Plus it has to be processed by nutrients. So, and I do it myself, and I'm paying attention to what I'm doing. I can only imagine if you don't understand this mechanism, we spend our whole life overeating.
Well, there's also the sort of ratio of nutrition to quantity of calories.
The calories.
So always trying to maximize the nutrition and limit the calories. And we aren't necessarily supported in that through industry. I mean, that's why we have the longevity product line.
Calories are cheap. Nutrients aren't. calories are much cheaper than nutrients, so we end up with foods that have lots of calories but not as much nutrient. Excuse me. Plus, our brain is hardwired to find calories because for eons, calories and nutrients came together. So we end up, our brain was looking for calories because we're living with a caveman brain where it used to be when you got calories, you also got the nutrients with it. Processed food is basically food that has those two things separated, where you get the calories, but you don't get the nutrients. So the body drives us out for calories, thinking that, well, you get calories, you're going to get nutrients, because for eons, that's what happened. But today, that doesn't happen. So it ends up, what does occur is you eat the calories, and your body says, where the heck are my nutrients? Go down and get me some more calories. So you get some more calories. The body says, that wasn't it. Get me some more calories. And we end up on this constant search for nutrients that we're hoping to obtain by getting calories, but it never happens, which is why, Jonty, supplementing can be so helpful.
Right.
Because especially with your calories, especially using your supplements with your meals, because then your body's satisfied. Then your body gets the micronutrients that it needs to process the macronutrients, number one, and your number two, your body will feel satisfied much more quickly. That's why people lose weight when they start the Beyond Tangy Tangerine, for example. It's one of the first things that happen is people feel full, they feel satisfied quicker, and they notice that they're losing weight when they start not just the BTT, but an entire supplement program is one of the best ways that you can lose weight.
So fruit bowl's great. It's a good start, but maybe throw in a supplement program with it as well.
It's delicious, and I can see why people would like it. It sounds really delicious. I haven't done it, but it sounds really delicious. But you know what? An egg, to me, or a piece of fish, those are the ideal breakfast, is an egg and a piece of fish. I do fish every morning. I do fish in the morning 3 or 4 times a week.
I'll do like cheese, sharp cheese, sauerkraut, and then something pickled
awesome.
Asparagus, pickled.
Yeah, exactly. That's another thing. You talk about the three meals a day kind of meme that's out there that we don't really examine, but it's kind of been given to us. Another one is, why do you have a bacon and egg breakfast or a cereal breakfast or an oatmeal breakfast? Where did that come from? Where do our food choices come from for every meal? Basically, they were told to us. In fact, there's a whole story about the bacon. You know about the whole story with Edward Bernays, the bacon breakfast or the big breakfast, the hearty breakfast.
Oh, I'm familiar with Bernays. So
he's the guy who came up with it because he was working for the Beechwood Packing Company. The Beechwood Packing Company wanted to spike their bacon sales. So Edward Bernays did a whole advertising campaign on why you want to eat a big breakfast with lots of bacon in it. And that was in the 1930s. And to this day, that Edward Bernays breakfast is standard fare.
The culture of eating, as is true sometimes with culture in general, is not your friend. Create your own eating culture.
Yeah, and you get more energy with small amounts of food. When you eat a meal, the blood gets rerouted to your digestive system away from your brain, away from your muscles. This is why people need naps after they eat a meal. And the bigger the meal, the more the blood's going to get rerouted in order to process that food. And that's blood that could be used for fighting diseases, for thinking clearly, and for moving your muscles and moving your body. So the less you eat, the longer you live. The less you eat, the more resources, nutritional resources and blood resources you're going to have for doing the good stuff, being creative, being productive, moving your body.
Right, and being able to discern the BS from the truth. Ben, did you get it? I don't know if you got much of a chance to. Sure, I'll just remind you the headline. There was that one article from the British Medical Journal, Selling Sickness.
Oh, that's a good one. That's a book. That comes from a book called Selling Sickness, and it's absolutely true.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, there's a really cool book came out I think in the 90s called Selling Sickness, and it's how the drug companies need us to be sick. They need to come up with diseases. They need to come up with reasons so that you can use their products. We have to really understand that our pharmacomedical industry is an industry. It's not there.
Right.
This is so important. And I don't know if somebody's going to beat me up for saying this, but the fact I'm telling you this as a pharmacist, the drug industry doesn't make money by helping people get better. It makes money by keeping people on their products. And keeping people on multiple products.
Right.
It has to do that in order to sustain itself. I was just reading today how now they think the vaccine, and I know we shouldn't even say that, you might have to cut that out, but the latest medical intervention It's not even a vaccine. The latest medical intervention. Now it only lasts 8 months. You read this? This came out on MedPage.
But it doesn't surprise me.
It's only good for 8 months. What does that mean? Every 8 months,
right,
you're going to be lining up for another medical intervention. Come on, Jonty. Who does not see through this?
Yeah.
Who does not see through this?
Right.
I mean, this is like so obvious. Am I missing something here?
Extraordinary research done. I mean, it's extraordinary with regards to the conclusions of the benefits of vitamin D in particular, with regards to a certain disease that may or may not be in the zeitgeist of our contemporary world.
It's not, they do talk about vitamin D, but it's more than that. It's good nutrition. It's, I don't even I can tell you about zinc and vitamin C and all, and N-acetylcysteine, all of these have antiviral properties and selenium, but it's just good nutrition. And it's good dietary strategies. And it's slow, deep, rhythmic breathing. And it's lightening up. And it's exercising. And it's like there's all of these ways that we can hack into our body's biochemistry without medical intervention. That's my problem as a pharmacist. That's my problem with this medicalization of our entire lot, of all the events and all the experiences in our lives.
Right.
That's the issue I have. I don't. If people want to have a medical intervention, that's fine. But this idea that that's the only way that you can keep your body strong and healthy is to somehow intervene with it with some kind of toxin from the outside, it doesn't make sense to me.
But don't you love hearing from an older person in their 70s or 80s and they say, I'm on absolutely no medicine?
Yes, I love it when I hear it. It's not that often when I hear it. I heard it a couple times today, actually. People ask me all the time what medications I take. They just assume.
Right.
I'm 61 years old. They just assume that I'm going to be on medication. And really, they're fair to assume it because the vast majority of people over 60 are on multiple medications, not just one, multiple.
Yeah, you should be on a metformin,
blood pressure medicine, a statin drug,
Right. And what so often could be treated with diet is treated with a drug that doesn't, as you say, it doesn't actually eliminate the cause.
It doesn't eliminate the cause. It creates an additional burden, additional toxicity burden on the body. It drains your body of raw materials, of nutrition, of nutrients that it should be using to fight the disease that you're taking the drug for.
Yeah, it's actually your liver.
I mean, you take a drug for your heart, it deprives your body of B vitamins, which are important for your heart. You take a statin drug, which stops your body from to protect your heart, which stops your body from making coenzyme Q10, which you need for your heart.
And then the drugs end up in the water system because they come out of your body. I always remember, this is a bit of a horrific story, but I'll tell it real quick. I was watching, that show Dirty Jobs. And they did this one dirty job where they went into a sewage system. And one of the guys who regularly did this job said, there's going to be a big lump of cholesterol right there. And he went over to the side of, it's human waste that's going through this tunnel. And he goes over to the side of it, and there's this 3 foot in diameter blob of cholesterol. And he goes and scrapes it off with a shovel.
It's literally cholesterol.
I found that really fascinating. So all the stuff that we're putting into our body, it's also going out into the environment. It's all of these drugs are a permanent part of planet Earth. Once we produce them and process them.